Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye is meeting members of the ruling party for talks on the recent interKorean agreement and to ask for their cooperation during the second half of her term. South Korea admits it will be difficult to arrange reunions for war-separated families before next month's Chuseok holiday period, given the lack of time available to contact and organise their relatives on both sides of the border. Plus, after blowing up an ancient temple in Palmyra, the Islamic State group releases photos of the UNESCO World Heritage Site's destruction. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 26th of August. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon: for the second time since taking office 2.5 years ago, President Park Geun-hye has invited all members of the ruling Saenuri party to a luncheon at her office. Officials say the president is expected to seek the party's cooperation to generate tangible results from her policies as she marks the midpoint of her 5-year term this week. Presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-uk said the president will discuss the agreement reached at Seoul's recent high-level talks with North Korea. She'll also highlight the need for Parliament to swiftly approve bills related to her reform drive, including labour reforms. It's reported that President Park delivered the invitation to party leader Kim Moo-sang through her senior political secretary on Tuesday. South Korea is preparing to hold regular and systematic dialogue with North Korea. This according to Seoul's unification ministry. At a regular press briefing on Wednesday, ministry spokesman Park Geun-hye said details for the future dialogues have yet to be set. He said once dialogue begins, the North will likely bring up the possibility of lifting the South's May 24th sanctions levied on the North, but that the matter will be dealt with then. Seoul slapped the sanctions on North Korea following its sinking of a South Korean warship back in 2010. Working-level talks will soon take place on arranging separated family reunions around the Korean Thanksgiving holiday next month, but South Korea's unification minister has admitted it would be difficult to hold the actual reunions before the holiday. A spokesman from the main opposition party said Hong Yong-pyo made the assessment at a briefing on the interKorean deal to party lawmakers at the National Assembly. Hong reportedly said there were practical challenges in arranging a large-scale reunion, such as contacting many families and relatives, so the two Koreas have decided to hold smaller-scale reunions on a more regular basis. The minister is also known to have made clear to North Korean officials during the meeting that it would be difficult to proceed with the reunions without the North's responsible behaviour regarding the recent landmine explosions that severely injured 2 South Korean soldiers. So, as we just heard, resuming reunions for families separated by the Korean War was one of the agreements reached between the two Koreas at their recent high-level talks. For a look at what this could mean for inter-Korean relations, Hwang Sang-hee reports.
The inter-Korean agreement to hold a set of family reunions this Korean Thanksgiving holiday will begin with a working-level Red Cross meeting early next month. The resumption of the reunions, the first since February last year, has always been high on South Korea's agenda. In her Liberation Day speech a couple of weeks ago, President Park Geun-hye had urged the North to help arrange reunions as a way to rebuild trust between the two Koreas.
이산가족 문제만큼은 아무리 정세가 어렵고 이념이 대립한다고 해도 인도적 견지에서 남북이 근본적인 해결 방안을 찾아야 합니다.
Millions of family members were separated by the Korean War in the 1950s, but time is running out for the elderly victims. Out of the nearly 130,000 registered divided family members in the South, nearly half have already passed away. South Korean efforts to resume the reunions have always been hampered by North Korea's demands that it receive something in return, like the lifting of sanctions. No details for the upcoming reunion have been set yet, but many speculate the meeting will take place in time for Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, at North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort. Although the working-level talks next month may not be smooth sailing, some say the resumption of reunions could play a key role in expanding humanitarian exchanges between the two Koreas. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The South Korean military has lowered its defense posture from the highest alert level, prompted by the heightened tensions with North Korea earlier this month. A military source says that the maximum alert level sent to the frontline military units is being scaled down now. The source, however, added that the soldiers will remain on a position of higher readiness than normal as a precautionary measure. And while controversy hangs over the interpretation of North Korea's expression of regret for its recent landmine provocation, the United States has chosen to emphasize the importance of the two Koreas reaching an agreement through dialogue. Connie Kim reports.
The United States remained tight-lipped on whether North Korea's expression of regret in the interKorean agreement meant an apology for the landmine provocation that injured 2 South Korean soldiers. Speaking at a regular press briefing on Tuesday, U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby said it was inappropriate for Washington to characterize the difference between the words regret and apology. Kirby instead chose to emphasize that an agreement was reached and that President Park Geun-hye found acceptable the expression made by Pyongyang. In the 6-clause agreement released by the two Koreas, Pyongyang's expression of regret over the landmine blast that severed the legs of 2 South Korean soldiers was key to the halting of South Korea's loudspeaker broadcasts at the border. Seoul said it views the expression as a de facto apology, but some critics argue that it's difficult to accept it as an apology and cited the fact that Pyongyang did not promise to prevent another such accident from happening. Kirby said Washington will monitor how the agreement is carried out. Following the two Koreas' announcement, the U.S. immediately hailed the breakthrough deal, saying it'll continue to work closely with Seoul to promote peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A prosecutor in France says the gunman who was foiled from carrying out a suspected terror attack on a high-speed train in France had terrorist intent. Speaking at a press conference on Tuesday, François Molin said the suspect's plan was premeditated and targeted, and his claims that he only planned to rob passengers was far-fetched. Now, French authorities have opened a probe into the gunman, Moroccan Ayoub Al-Kazani, over attempted murders with terrorist intent. 3 Americans and a British man managed to wrestle the 26-year-old suspect to the ground after spotting him loading an assault rifle on the train traveling from Amsterdam to Paris last Friday. In Syria, militants continue to wage war on the country's rich heritage, demolishing ancient religious sites, monuments and historical buildings. The group that calls itself Islamic State has released images that appear to show the destruction of a temple in a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Son Jung-in reports.
This is Baal Shamin Temple, one of the most complete buildings in the Syrian city of Palmyra, also known as the Pearl of the Desert. A barrel of explosive is strapped onto every column before being detonated, leaving behind nothing but a gray cloud of smoke. These photographs began circulating on social media on Tuesday, a day after reports that Islamic State militants demolished 2,000-year-old ancient relics in the UNESCO World Heritage City. The head of UNESCO called the destruction a war crime. After seizing the city in May, militants are known to have torn down the lion statue of Athena, another 2,000-year-old treasure, early last month. Last week, they beheaded a highly respected antiquity scholar who dedicated his life protecting the city's historical and cultural treasures. IS militants consider the artifacts and statues symbols of paganism that must be destroyed under its puritanical interpretation of Islam. They have been looting relics to sell them in order to fund their activities, with those unsold being indiscriminately destroyed. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Korean consumers are growing more upbeat following the recent outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome that dealt a blow to the economy. The Bank of Korea says its composite consumer sentiment index hit 102 in August, 2 points higher than the previous month, underscoring improving confidence in the economy. A reading above 100 indicates optimists outnumber pessimists about economic conditions in the coming month. The MERS outbreak, in fact, caused the index to tumble from 105 in May to 99 in June, when fears about the outbreak were at their peak. The central bank attributed the boost in consumer confidence to the end of the MERS outbreak and government efforts to lift consumer sentiment through various stimulus measures. Now, 4 out of 10 outside directors at Korea's top 30 conglomerates are former bureaucrats. Korean companies have shown a preference for hiring retired senior government officials for their influence as lobbyists to circumvent tight regulations, and this is in contrast to the US, which prefers outside directors with actual field experience. Kim Min-ji has more.
It's been common practice in Korea for conglomerates to hire former bureaucrats as outside directors. According to market tracker CEO Score, among some 600 outside directors at 187 affiliates of the nation's top 30 groups, 39% were former government officials. Only 97 independent directors, or 16%, were from business circles. This is in sharp contrast to the top 100 firms selected by Forbes, which prefer to hire specialists in certain fields. Among 815 independent directors, almost 3/4 were former businessmen, while ex-bureaucrats accounted for less than 10%. Korean companies tend to show a strong preference for retired senior bureaucrats as outside directors because of their close ties with political circles or the government, which can help them exert influence. The U.S., on the other hand, prefers those with on-the-job experience. At U.S. retail giant Walmart, for example, 5 out of 9 independent directors are from business circles, including the CEOs of Instagram and Yahoo. Korea's top conglomerate, Samsung Group, hired roughly 1/3 of its outside directors who were former government officials, while the figure stood at about 7% for former businessmen. At 5 Korean conglomerates, including Doosan Group and CJ Group, the proportion tops 60%. However, the ratio of outside directors from government circles in Korea is on the decline. The number of former bureaucrats fell 7% from 2013, reducing the overall proportion by almost 3%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, the number of product recalls hit a record high in Korea last year. The Fair Trade Commission says over 1,700 products recalls were made in 2014. That's up 80% from the previous year. While most recalls were ordered by the government, nearly 20% were voluntarily recalled by companies. Medical products saw the biggest increase with 711 cases last year. That's up from just 161 the year before. The sharp rise came after the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety cracked down on companies selling Korean medicinal herbs and ordered well over 500 recalls in October last year. Now, as smartphones become lighter, more compact and even curvier, batteries are having to evolve as much as the devices they fit in. And Korean researchers may have hit the jackpot, developing a way to print batteries directly onto surfaces. Park Geun-hye reports.
To keep pace with ever-evolving devices, batteries of various shapes and sizes have been invented. A team of researchers from Korea has now developed a new technique which allows for the printing of rechargeable batteries on almost any surface. Researchers have thus far printed a heart-shaped battery on a cup, on paper eyeglasses resembling Google Glass, and even applied them as letters on paper. The battery-embedded surfaces can power LEDs once they're connected to cables. To create the new printable solid-state lithium-ion batteries, a paste is used to produce the electrolyte, while the electrodes are composed of a slurry. They're then consecutively printed onto a surface before being cured with ultraviolet light. The solution can also be printed through a stencil, allowing the batteries to be produced in various shapes, letters, and designs.
Our printable battery seamlessly integrates with any complete product, and it can be used in smart wearable electronics and IoT devices.
Published in a recent issue of the scientific journal Nano Letters, the new battery is already competitive in regards to its performance. However, the researchers plan to improve the energy density and battery life and predict that the batteries will later be printed in various 3D shapes using 3D printers. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we have been following on this Wednesday lunchtime here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.com/news. Have a great day. Goodbye.